to make sure that these people are loyal, well-funded, and are ready when they are called upon. And that's what has happened.
Alia Brahimi, I want to turn now to tribal affiliations in Libya and how these pockets of power play out and what is going on right now. You made a statement not so long ago in which you said that in Libya it will be the tribal system that will hold the balance of power, not the military. Tell us more about that.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't overemphasize the tribal element. I mean, yeah, I'll just clarify that now. But in actual fact, Gaddafi has tended to perpetuate his rule through a strategy of divide and rule among the tribes, but also within them. And I think, you know, various power centers are defined tribally. That can't be denied. But in actual fact, it's almost in opposition to any unified sort of armed forces. Because as I say, we don't have the same situation where there's a robust armed forces under responsible command and indeed unified command that can actually defect. In actual fact, what we have is a deliberately fragmented and dispersed armed forces and then a series of overlapping militias overriding those in a sense. So the situation is very, very different from the situation we saw in both Egypt and Tunisia.
Faraj Najam, as Alia points out there, we shouldn't be overemphasizing the role that tribes play in Libya. But during that speech that Colonel Gaddafi made on television on Tuesday night, I mean, he did make a point of saying that in Libya, all tribes support him. He said, all tribes support me. Was he being a little bit delusional there?
Absolutely. Tribes are not going to be a major feature in future Libya. We know from history, and this is from a research I conducted myself, that whenever we have state institutions, we have the rule of law, and we have some sort of justice, economically, socially, and so on, tribes tend to take a second seat, so, you know, back seat, and they don't play any role in the running of the affairs of the state. But Gaddafi, at this point, he's trying to rally the tribes because he has lost everything, but he has forgotten that he has lost the tribes as well. I mean, you've had all the tribes, you know, starting from the tribes of the East, who were instrumental in dislodging the Italians and the Germans for the benefit of the Allies in World War II, and helping to establish the Emirates and then the Kingdom of Libya, to the tribes in the south who were with the French, dislodging the Italians again and the Germans from the south, but also, importantly, the tribes of the west, namely Warfella, Tarhuna, Misrata, and so on and so forth. And those tribes have come out publicly and made it very clear that Gaddafi, goodbye, we don't want you.
There is one other card that tribal leaders could play, Rashid, and that is the control they have over the flow of oil. Last Sunday, the leader of the Al-Zawaya tribe, which is in the east, threatened to stop the flow of oil to the western part of the country unless the attacks on the protesters stopped. Is it likely that this, if they do stop the oil, that it would perhaps change the behavior of Colonel Gaddafi in Tripoli?
I don't think so. Now, Zawaya, yes, they did, but changing the behavior of Gaddafi, no, that's definitely not. And I'm here on as Dr. Faraj, and of course he's very expert on this, and I read most of his book, and he's did a very good job on the research about the tribes in Libya and more. I spoke to one of the highest, without mentioning the name, no tribes. And when I went after exactly what Saif, his speech, and I talked to him and I said, you hear the speech, what do you think? He said to me on this, he said, Rashid, the fascists didn't separate us. Do you think somebody like Gaddafi will come and do it now? Libya is gonna be well. And I think the tribes, they have very, very, very good leaders, and they will guide Libya into a democratic country in God's will.
Alia Brahimi, do you believe that to be the case? We know that Colonel Gaddafi has stoked rivalries between these different tribes. We know a lot about his divide and rule tactics, but is it likely that he could get to the point where he could set one tribe against the other?
Well, I think think the dividing lines are essentially going to be pro and anti-Gaddafi, pro and anti the status quo. And I think that's, you know, it all depends on what he can offer people. So in that sense, I don't think his situation is qualitatively different from any beleaguered autocrat who's making a last stand. But of course, I think he will exploit tribal allegiances. He always has. The Green Book itself, as a political manifesto, is essentially embedding tribalism. It's a call for tribal society and a tribal state. So in actual fact, we can expect him to do that. But really what this boils down to is people that are going to throw their lot in with him and people that have decided that the writing is on the wall and it's time to defect.
Dr. Najm, is tribalism still a big issue in Libya? Because we know that in recent years, say in the last 20 years or so, it's been on the decline. Tribal kinship has been on the decline because of education, because people have been moving to the cities, urbanization. So perhaps are we making a little bit too much of the different tribes in Libya?
Well, tribes, or tribalism rather, it increases when people are desperate, when there is a sheer absence of law and order, where there are no true representative of people. So people would turn to their tribes for protection, for help, for service. But when you have a state and you have a civil society, a tribe tends to take a second role, and people will just come forward to the state for help. But what's happening in Libya, it's nothing to do with tribes or tribalism. It's to do with a man and his sons surrounded by desperate, hopeless, helpless lynchmen who would do anything just to stay in power. And I wouldn't be very surprised if the whole of the Gaddafi tribe coming out and distancing themselves as their section did in Benghazi from the regime. So I didn't think this is to do with tribalism. It's all about injustice, a dictatorship that has been there for so long. And by the way, the tribe of Gaddafi, even the most loyal tribes, and the tribe of Gaddafi themselves, they have not really benefited that much. It's only his own immediate family and a tiny network of cronies around him who have benefited from his regime. The rest are the same. If you look at the city of Sirte, where the tribe of Gaddafi living, they're just suffering as much as everyone else. Lack of infrastructure, of respect, even if you look at the closest lynchman and his cronies are not necessarily from his tribe, but they're thugs who happen to believe in his ideology and the way of running the country, and they just clustered around him. So it isn't to do with tribalism. It's about dislodging a regime which is a dictatorial.
Okay, Rashid Kikir, while we look at all these power shifts and what is playing out there in Libya, let's look a little bit outside that. Is it likely that Gaddafi will get any support in the Arab world? Does he have any close allies in the region?
What I have for Gaddafi right now is good luck. I mean, the guy, he's just went crazy. I mean, this is what I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna make it clear. Libyan lives, it's a red line, and he crossed it. It's not only he would got, there is no one, and I don't see Gaddafi, he knew from the beginning that his end is gonna be in Libya. The only place we can think